You're listening to Culture 360, the podcast that takes you inside the world of workplace and team culture. I'm Stu Savage, your host and guide, as we explore the ideas, people, and stories shaping the way we work, lead, and connect. So please subscribe, sit back, relax, and enjoy culture from every angle. Hello, good people, and welcome to Culture 360 in association with the Culture Room. I'm Stu Savage, culture consultant at the Culture Room, and your host for this podcast. And with me today, I've got a very good friend in university, Rob Watson, who's worked with youth in various roles over the last 20 years. And is also, unfortunately, it's always the year, Warrington Wolves Rugby League diehard. Excellent, as we've been discussing, Rob, excellent community club. I'm sure a Super League title is just around the corner. It's been a wee while between drinks. Obviously, I've seen things online about your little journalism articles, and obviously we've had some involvement over the years around Rugby League, and you've been telling me a few tales about psychology and youth and Warrington and what you've been up to over what must be now. We left university in 2003. I was the undergraduate degree, and we all went on to obviously be captains of industry and further afield, and you obviously went off and did it in other academia. So I think for the sake of the listener, just give us a bit about yourself and your background, Rob, and who you are and where you've come from. Those deep questions.
Wow, what a way to start. Yeah, so I've been working with young people for over 20 years in various roles. After that sports studies course that we did, or enjoying that sports studies course, that's when I went to sports coaching, first and foremost. So I worked as a community sports coach mainly, mostly in schools and stuff, but also at the University of Liverpool as well, coaching their teams there. Did that for around about the best part of 10 years. But then I found myself wanting to work with the young people outside of sport as well and find out, maybe taking a more holistic approach and find out what's going on for them, as well as just teaching them how to catch, kick, throw, hit, and so on, kind of help them with the life in general. So found the youth work jobs for 3 hours a week to begin with, but that very quickly grew into pretty much full-time role. So then I went more down the youth work route. So that was a lot of youth work residentials, which is my favourite part, going on trips to Lake District and Wales and places like that. But also a lot of what people probably think of as a youth work stuff in terms of youth club nights. Yes, there was pool and table tennis, but there was other stuff as well, I promise. And then the more work with young people, the more I realised just how much mental health was an issue. And it was like coming up time and time again that this was the thing that they probably needed the most help with. So that kind of went more down that route. So I was a suicide prevention advisor for a while and then a helpline. So again, that was young people, but that went up to 35. So basically helping people save their own lives, really, by listening to them and getting to know them and then giving them some advice. Then I did some training in schools, which was kind of CBT based, to help them with their anxiety and depression. And also a bit of resilience building. And then went into a role which was, we weren't counsellors, but it looked like counselling, it sounded like counselling. Young people called it counselling, they called us a lot of therapists or counsellors, even though we told them not to. So that was a lot of one-to-one support there, mental health-wise. And yeah, that pretty much brings us up to date. So I'm still looking for any sort of roles, really, but I'm still a massive sports geek, so I would love to be back to working in sport, especially sports psychology, sport journalism as well. I've done a sport journalism course recently. But yeah, I think now having had that varied experience, I'd like to get back into sport to bring that experience with me. So I wouldn't just be coming in purely as a technical coach. I would like to be treating those people as people first and foremost, and then helping them with the sport. So yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm at now.
So did it start off with a passion for sport, and Warrington brought that into your life, like in rugby league? You've obviously lived in the town for some time. And then that bled into working with youth, or was it very much about youth and then bringing sport as the vehicle?
It was more, the rugby league thing was interesting, really, in that I was always sporty as a kid, right from a really young age. Classically, because both parents were sporty, so did that sort of classic case of just following in their footsteps sort of thing. But in terms of rugby league specific, I have to acknowledge my primary school teacher, who was obsessed with the sport. So he realised my year group could actually play a bit. I think he originally thought we wouldn't be able to play that well because we were well behaved and quite academically inclined. So he assumed that the boys that could do that probably won't play rugby league very well. But once he realised that we could play, he got really into it. He coached us really intensely. Even like we'd have dinner time sessions where he'd stop on that. I was going to say whiteboard, but I'll give him the age where he wasn't a whiteboard. It would have been a chalkboard. But designing plays and stuff like that, he got, in terms of playing it, that's what really got me into it. A few of us from my primary school went on to play for Warrington, went under 11. So that kept everything going there. And then I think from then on, I played a lot of golf when I was a kid as well. And then when I hurt my knee around about 13, so I dislocated my knee when I was 13. So, other than that, I'm sure I would have been probably the best player in Super League history. I don't know. Probably not. It did kind of stop me playing rugby gradually. By the time I was 15, I kind of stopped playing. So golf took over from there. So I wanted, like I'm sure most kids that are into sport, what they really wanted to do was play sport. You wanted to be a professional sports player and stuff. So that's what I focused on for a little while. And then once that started thinking, this isn't happening straight away. That's when I kind of made that step to what's the next best thing, coaching. So I kept right into coaching that way. And I think, again, still being in Warrington, rugby league was the option. The one that get coached most in Warrington, other than maybe football, I suppose, is rugby league. And it was the one sport I'd been coached in as well. So I think that probably played a part in it as well. So as part of the degree, we had that work experience. For mine, I went to Warrington Wolves, who were, again, giving me age away. They were still at the Wilderspool Stadium then when they first started. And got into coaching that way in the primary school and stuff, and just basically didn't stop for 10 years.
Yeah, I think we crossed paths, obviously, at university, which was around 2000, with that undergraduate degree, which is, it was very sports studies driven, which was quite a generic, there was elements of all sport in that. But the thing that drew me in, and probably yourself, was that I had like this rugby league element to it, where we did modules or what they call papers in New Zealand and Australia that we did on rugby league. It was about coaching and business and all different. And I actually remember going on a bit of a field trip to Wilderspool with myself and having a look around the old school stadium as it was then. But that's what kind of drew me in, and I think we crossed paths there and got involved, and that really was a springboard. I'm sure it was for yourself. The degree actually just opened up a lot of doors, whether it was more academia or whether it was when we went off and did some coaching in the community with Warrington, which was a real eye opener, just getting around the schools and engaging kids with rugby league.
I'd almost forgotten this, but I think actually as part of the course, we did our level 2 as part of the course. So that without that being literally there right in front of me, I might not have done the level 2 that quickly. It might not have been something that I would have thought of doing. That definitely got me started.
So then from university, you graduated, and what happened then?
That was when I was still, that was a sports coaching time. So that was when I was coaching in primary schools most days. You helped me get a job at University of Liverpool, if you remember.
That's right.
I think you were, was it Knowsley, rugby league development?
Yeah, I was based with Merseyside rugby league after the RFL.
That's probably still my favourite coaching job, because as much as fun as it is coaching in primary school and stuff, you're not really coaching a lot of the time. You're doing little bits of coaching, but most of it is what I would call activity leading. Tended to refuse to tie shoelaces, but you do kind of end up tying shoelaces a little bit here and there. But the coaching at University of Liverpool I really, really enjoyed, because it was really interesting at university level, because you had some really, really good lads who were borderline Super League Academy type standard, and some lads who virtually never played before. I remember one lad turning up thinking it was rugby union because he didn't know there was 2 rugbies.
It does happen.
So you had the real variation of standard, but I really enjoyed sort of coaching the team rather than just doing activities in school and stuff, and picking a team and building that team spirit, because they were struggling. I've been struggling for years before I took over, so it was just really interesting taking a team and building them up to being competitive, and I really enjoyed that.
So you've had obviously that experience at university level coaching within primary schools, and you've seen the different age groups.
Yeah.
And then what was your main passion after that? Like you've obviously mentioned youth work.
Yeah, I think just looking back on it, life just happens to you sometimes, doesn't it? I think a lot of the time, rather than you're making conscious choices. But at the time, I was at Warrington Youth Club. That's where I was doing my youth work. And when I started there, it was a relatively small organisation, but at the time of that, it was growing and growing and growing, until eventually it became what we call now Warrington Youth Zone. And we have youth zones dotted around the UK. It became one of them, which is a monster of an organisation compared to where it was when I started. So as I started there, they kept increasing the hours. So, do you want to do 6 hours? Do you want to do 10 hours? And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And at the time as well, for whatever reason, the amount of hours being offered to me coaching in primary school and stuff was decreasing. So in the end, that's kind of when I stopped coaching, was when those two kind of crossed over and the youth work was taking off just as the coaching was kind of declining a little bit. So then it just became a case of, you know what, I can get enough hours just from youth work. I could still do a bit of sport while I'm there. There was a mini sport hall and stuff, so you used to do a bit of football and a bit of rugby and stuff here and there. So that's when the youth work kind of took over for kind of that was around 2010-ish, I would say, up until, going on again, sort of 7-8 years doing what I would call pure youth work before I kind of made a jump to the suicide prevention advisor, the more specific mental health type stuff.
Yeah. And did you feel like the things in the past, obviously the whole coaching and the youth work then led into the suicide prevention and really set you up for that role, or can you not be prepared for what you're about to see and hear in the suicide prevention?
I think it definitely helps. I think it was because of going into it with my eyes open to the mental health. I was aware of the mental health struggle.
Okay.
I think if I'd been a car salesman for 10 years, for example, no offense to car salesman, but I'd gone straight into being a suicide prevention advisor, then it might have been a bit of a shock in terms of I didn't realise how widespread this was. You know, how many people died by suicide and all that sort of thing. Don't get me wrong, I was learning stuff, becoming more aware of the situation, but there wasn't too much of it that was like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that at all. And a lot of the conversations, especially on residentials, young people tended to drop the guard on residentials a bit more because you're with them 24/7. Whereas normally when they come to a youth club for 2 hours a night or whatever it was, they would play a role to an extent, and they would act a certain way and have a bit of a mask on, perhaps. Maybe a better way of putting it. Whereas when you're away for 24/7 for 5 days or whatever it is, sooner or later that mask drops, and they would always get a lot more safeguarding type incidents because they were talking about stuff that happened to them. Sooner or later it just built up, and then they would have to come out. Equally, we get a lot more sort of mental health chats and young people acknowledging, you know what, I'm actually really struggling. Whereas when they're in the youth club with their mates, you're kind of putting that mask on and giving the impression that they're fine and nothing wrong with me and this, that, and the other. So, I think by that stage I'd had young people who were either attempting suicide or thinking about it and stuff like that. So it was something of a smooth transition rather than like a jarring. I think if I'd gone straight from sports coaching to suicide prevention advisor, that would have been a lot more jarring, more of a distinct change. But it's a relatively smooth progression.
And that role with the organisation around the suicide prevention, was that were children or kids or youth channeled towards you because of that, or did that come organically and you found out those things with them being
in terms of how they contacted us? So it was Papyrus. I worked for Papyrus, and the former was called Hopeline UK. So they were based in Warrington as it happened, and they've got offices around the UK now, but they've still got a base in Warrington. But it was literally just a helpline, so there was no referral process or anything like that. So easiest way to describe it maybe is that people would relate to Samaritans. So if you think of Samaritans, anybody can ring them anytime. So you'd have adverts out there, and you'd have your website saying ring us for this reason or that reason. And the the other thing was people could ring if they were concerned about somebody else. So apart from speaking to parents saying, I think my son and my daughter is having thoughts of suicide, I'm not sure what to do. So people would advise them on what to do there. And then you have young people, and again, like I said, they go up to 35. So that was, I guess that was, in a way, that was more of a difference for me than the actual subject matter. It was, okay, now I've got to speak to this 32-year-old who's a whole lot of life experience. I'm going to speak to them slightly differently than I would a 16 or 17-year-old. Not necessarily that differently, but there were definitely times when there was, I need to phrase these things differently or whatever. Yeah, so they could just ring. They could ring more than once if they wanted. They could end the call any time. It was all anonymous, but they could leave the name if they wanted to. So in case they ever phone back, they could say, I'm so-and-so, and then the notes would be there on the screen, so they wouldn't have to repeat everything if they didn't want to. But yeah, so we did a little bit of training as well out in the community. I would have liked to have done more of that, to be honest. I really loved delivering training. That was more about how to keep other people safe from suicide. So you do it in schools and stuff like that to help teachers with that and stuff. Yeah, so it was like an open phone line. People could just ring it if they were concerned about themselves or about somebody else.
So you obviously moved into psychology,
yes,
and you've mentioned, you did a course on psychology. Yeah. Is that after that work or before? Or?
It was during, I first went back to university in 2013 to do educational psychology. By that stage, I'd been a youth worker for about 4 years. So it was kind of trying to put a bit of theory on what I was picking up myself, if you know what I mean. So, joy from my experience, I was starting to have thoughts and ideas of myself and the best way to work with people, the best way to support them, this, that, and the other. So it was just kind of trying to see if the existing theories kind of map onto what I believed anyway. So that was kind of a motivation to go and I was always interested in psychology anyway for a long time. When we did our course, for example, I kind of split in. We had some physiology modules, some psychology modules. I'll be down on it, and the lecturers would not be surprised to hear this. I wasn't as into this physiology lesson as I was psychology.
Revelation, right there.
Yeah. So that was really clear to me even back then that definitely going to go down more the psychology route. So yeah, that was Edgell Uni in Lonsford. Okay. Where we did educational psychology for 3 years. So that was so I was still working as a youth worker at that time. Used to annoy me when I obviously was quite old by that stage, so definitely a mature student. But the young, I call them young people, even though they're adults, the young people on the course were brilliant to work with, absolutely amazing. But every now and again, it would annoy me when they're like, I've not got time to do that essay. You're not got a job or anything. How have you not got time to do this essay? I'm working almost full time and trying to get this essay done. But yeah, so that was really interesting.
So that was undergraduate degree.
Yeah, so that was undergraduate, and that took me up to I graduated in 2016. The next degree I actually did was a little bit off being track, but it was still back at Edgell, but it was a master's in creative writing, which is another thing that I've always.
That's a leap from psychology to creative writing.
Yeah. So that was more of a what. I think the idea was, I'd like to have a master's degree. And I really like I've been writing since I was a kid. In primary school, I was like writing stories and stuff. I used to drive my teachers insane with how long the stories were. So it took them long as I'm on. But so I think that was motivation there was, can I do a master's in something that I really want to do and really want to enjoy doing anyway? So I did that back at Edgell and enjoyed it. But it was one of those degrees where you think, so far, that's not really progressed me in any way, but it was an enjoyable thing to do. Then, so that was like 2017, 18, and then about 2021, I think it was, signed up for a master's in sport and exercise psychology. So that was at Stafford Uni, but it was all online. So I didn't need to leave the house. So it was, they had live lectures online, but obviously they recorded them. So if you couldn't make it, you could catch the recording and stuff like that. Must admit, I didn't really enjoy the online experience. It was fine. You learn what you need to learn, but definitely missed that sort of face-to-face interaction with a lecturer and being around other students and stuff like that. There's so many things that you pick up on just by asking a quick question at the end of a lecture, or chat to someone else who was in the lecture. And like, okay, yeah, I'm getting it now. But yeah, it was an interesting course, and yeah, again, just trying to put a piece of paper and a bit of theory on stuff that felt like you already knew.
So you obviously had a varied, and obviously coming in out of psychology,
yes,
and creative writing, and just probably going back to like your work career around youth and suicide prevention, and obviously this podcasting and around culture, organisational culture. We've had a little bit of a conversation offline just about putting the world to rights about different sport franchises and clubs, and we've fixed everything in the last hour. But from a cultural sense, I mean, you could go down any road really in your profession. How do you see it about building sports environments and cultures, and from a psychology perspective, or youth, or even starting with Warrington Wolves? How do you fix that, Rob?
Wow, that is a big question. That's a series of podcasts by itself, not just one podcast. But I think the thing for me, I mean, and as you get like slightly more and more senior, as you go along, and you get the meetings change, don't they, in terms of what meetings you're invited to and what meetings you're in. I think for me, there's a lot of talk and not so much action a lot of the time. And there's what I call as well, this just pure on my terminology, it didn't exist, I don't think, but like website culture, where you click on most websites of any organisation, wherever you go, even if you just focus on the public sector and charities or whatever, and they will say, these are our core beliefs. We believe that every child matters. We believe that this on this and this, and nobody should ever be left alone with this, and all that sort of thing. That's very easy to do. You can build a website. I can't, but people can build a website in a day or two, and you can put those things on, and that's easy to write. Yeah. And when I first used to see those sort of things, I get caught up in that and be like, that sounds amazing. This place sounds amazing. But the more experience I've had, and the more organisations I've worked for, you start thinking, I need to see behind the curtain there a little bit. Are they actually doing this? Or is it just something that makes it look good on the website? And we touched on this before in terms of you get leaders who will say the right thing and give the speech and come up with the values, and they'll have meetings for hours to design these values, and then they'll get a consultant in and they'll send the feedback about the values to the consultant. The consultant will come back in 3 months' time with a suggestion for what the value should be, and then you go back to your staff and say, these are the values now. Right, okay, but it's just the day-to-day, minute-by-minute stuff that makes a by far bigger difference to cultures for me. There's no point having you could have the best write up about what your organisation stands for in the world. If you don't do it, it means nothing. And people see that very quickly as well. I think they'll. So you come into a meeting, you think this should be a really high energized meeting because we're talking about why we exist, we're talking about our values and our core values. But you look around the room and people's eyes are rolling and they're not really into it, especially the people who've been there a while. You can notice that and you'll be there excited. You know that people have been there for years and years and years, their eyes are rolling the back of their head a little bit because they kind of know it's not really what we actually do. Yeah. And then the first time that leader gives a speech, people might be leaning forward and getting excited. But if the second time they give that speech, in the gap between, if I've not been living up to that speech, then I've not listened to that speech really. And then the third time, just completely switched off and so on. So yeah, it's definitely a case of what are you actually doing, not what you said you're doing. I think that's the biggest thing for me.
I think that the standout thing that you've talked about there and leaning into culture is living those values, and what behaviours sit under the values, and what rituals and actions do you actually see? Because like you've said on the website, it's just words. And that comes back to the theory is, and I mentioned this in the podcast with Chris yesterday around Liverpool Football Club, is the Edgar Schein model, who is termed the godfather of culture, and uses an iceberg analogy. Above the water is the things that you can see. So the behaviours, the actions, symbols, the artifacts, the badges, the banners, they're all the things that exist, are tangible. But underneath the water, then you've got the values, the beliefs, and the stories, and the narratives, the emotions of the people involved or the organisation. And what you want to see really is people living those values and walking the walk. And it's generally something that people have to have in their identity and their beliefs and values that leading up to the purpose and vision of the organisation. And are they a good cultural fit for the organisation? And are they actually carrying that good name of the organisation and behaving in the right way? I think probably leaning into what you're saying is that doesn't always happen with some organisations. It's artifacts or words on the wall or a website, if you like. And people aren't living them.
And then sometimes there's this disconnect, branching off slightly here, between the vision at the top and the practicality of actually delivering it. Manager, upper management might be saying, oh, we need to do this and this more. And the people on the ground floor are saying, that would be lovely, but we just can't because of X, Y, and Z. And then the frustration builds down here with the people on the ground floor because the management is saying, oh, you're not doing this, this, and this. That's not what part right now because I'm dealing with so and so who's just done that. So there's an element of, yes, most visions look great in theory, but are they actually practical, and can you actually do them given the environment that you're working in?
And I think that's probably where culture and strategy marry up quite nicely. Like, you've got the roadmap of the strategy of where we're trying to get to, and how we're going to get there. And then the values is very much the humanistic bit that plugs into the strategy. And you have, how do we want to behave? How do we want to be seen? What would people see, feel, and hear when they come into our organisation? In the workshops, how could we run a task called T-shirt task? And it's the front of your T-shirt as a person when you arrive. What do you want people to see, feel, and hear as a person? And then on the back of the T-shirt, once you leave, or whatever it might be, leave the room, leave the workshop, what would you like people to say and feel and hear about you? So it comes back to those values. A book I was reading recently called Belonging by Owen Eastwood, who's actually a Kiwi living in England, funnily enough. Has done quite a lot of work in sport as a former lawyer. And his analogy in the book is that Polynesian tribes would have rocks in the boat, which represented the village, and they call them anchors, not values. And the rocks would represent things from the village that were very specific to them. And it might mean innovation, or it might mean ingenuity or professionalism or hard work. And those were the values that they would go back to, and represented them as people from the village when they were going on voyages. And that's a very basic way of saying, look, values that need to be representative of the people, and then what behaviours sit under them, and how do people behave within your organisation, because that's what people see. So that's the bit above the iceberg above, and it's what people will see on a daily basis. I'm not sure if you've experienced those sorts of things.
I think there's that, and I think it's difficult when you're talking about organisations that have existed potentially for over 100 years or so. If somebody starts working there tomorrow, that person wasn't involved when they set these values and this, that, and the other. So then it's that element of, should it perhaps be more? I think most organisations perhaps miss the trick where it should be more apparent in the recruitment process what your values are and what you stand for, and this, that, and the other. Make that really, really crystal clear, to the person being interviewed, so they can think, doesn't really align with my values, so not going to be withdrawn my application, or, that really relates to that, so I'd really like to work here, and now we understand exactly what we do in. And there's times when, again, if it's a slightly biggish organisation where you have your departments, there can be times when each department is like a mini culture in itself, isn't it? So the overall organisation's culture might not be that great, but there might be one department here who's doing really well, and then within their team are doing really well. It might be a new department, maybe like a branch that's only just started in the last 2 or 3 years. So that's something that I experienced recently. One of my most recent full-time job was where they set up basically a new department, and that's when we were doing the listing service, like the one-to-one counselling on the start. Started off with very few of us, like literally 2 of us to begin with, and within a year grew to 6, 7, 8 people doing these one-to-one sessions. We felt like we enjoyed working with each other and this, that, and the other, but the overall organisation were a bit like, not sure we really want to. We're not like really on board with their values and this, that, and the other, but it was more, we could still enjoy coming to work because we had our own culture. If that makes sense. Obviously, that's not ideal. Ideally, you want the whole thing to be or singing the same in cheek and be really happy about the whole organisation. But I think that's something that people can kind of control the controllables. It gets a little bit, if you're in a department and you're not the CEO or you're not a senior manager, it's going to be really, really difficult for you to change the culture of the entire organisation. But maybe what you can do, what can I do in my department if I'm the manager of this department or whatever? Can I make it so this department really go? And obviously, ideally, the CEO then see, well, this department seems really happy or really functioning really well. Can I get that person to another department and make that spread again? An idea that would happen, but yeah, that probably doesn't happen too often.
I think it's some of the great organisations that you see, there is an overarching culture within the organisation. Yeah. So, this is the purpose, vision and values. Yeah. But then there are subcultures, and the subcultures basically are different departments. If you think about it and you touched on us having about 8 people that really got on. Yeah. And that was a subculture. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to know what the secret sauce within that little part of your department was and why you got on something. Yeah. Was it just personality traits and common interests? Or was it that you were actually, looking at the common purpose and vision, really enjoyed your job? Yeah. So the great leaders and the great organisations generally have a handle on the whole organisation and the subcultures and understanding what's going on. And that can obviously be quite difficult when you've got, an organisation, maybe 300, 400, 500 people but you also, something you touched on then, you need to revisit it. Because if you're a new employee coming into the organisation, you've not been actually a builder, if you like, of that culture, whether it's good, bad or indifferent. And because culture's evolving all the time, good organisations come back and revisit it. Yeah. Because if you don't control your culture, it will control you. Yeah. And you need to obviously make it a priority, maybe once every 3 to 6 months, to actually run a workshop or facilitate something that's actually revisiting this, but also the day-to-day rituals. So what are the rituals within your team, your department, your organisation that you do every day that are the 1% plays that lead to good traditions and good practices within the team or the organisation or the workplace that actually reinforces the behaviours. So, for example, I was part of the Central Pulse franchise, which is a professional netball franchise in New Zealand. And I was part of the backroom staff in the community team. Yeah. And we had a lady come in, Bella Ansell, who really lit a fire under me about this stuff, and the light bulb went off around culture. Okay. And she started to put little rituals in place. Right. And it was simple things. Yeah. Firstly, we would greet each other every morning and say hello, make eye contact and how are you? But it wasn't a 20-minute conversation around the water cooler. Yeah. And then other things like if we had an issue, it's always great to have a whinge and go below the line, isn't it? But also you've got to come back with a solution. So what we would say is get off what's not working. And what we meant by that was it's also to acknowledge, critique something, but then let's get back above the line and find out how do we fix it. Yeah. And we had probably 10 of these rituals that we would come and, once you cross the threshold into the workplace, into the office, that we would abide by as a team. But the team were involved in building those. Yeah. The leadership gave us the opportunity and the ownership to develop them. And I think that's key with great organisations is that the leader provide the opportunity and they have their say, but also it's bottom up and top down. Definitely. And you've got to have because the culture is the people. And if the leader's just sat in an empty building on their own, they have nothing. So it's about the people and relationships, and it's very much about people and relationships.
Yeah, I think it's that, obviously leadership is very, very complex and not easy at all. If it was, there'd be like a 10-page book somewhere on how to be a leader, and we'd always read that and we'd get on it and smash it. But yeah, I think they've got to live the mantra, set the example, but also try and make people feel included and have a say in all these things. Yes, sooner or later someone might have to make a decision, but I think most people, as long as they feel like they've been consulted, even if their idea doesn't end up being the one, after that, I think when decisions are made for them and above them, that's when people get frustrated when they even ask me about what the best thing was to do.
And there have been sports organisations in the past I've been involved with, and they've rewrote strategies and rewrote them, but not actually consulted the staff. Yeah. So they consult the CE, the board members. They would consult the actual participants in the sport, but then they would forget the staff. And then what you, like you've just done here too, you would then create this environment where I didn't write this.
Yeah.
So I'm not invested in it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't feel the ownership for it to carry it out. So if you are actually creating something like that, you've got to include as many people and be part of the process. Moving into a sports sense, you're obviously Warrington Wolves diehard.
Yes.
We've been discussing lots of different sports online, NFL, basketball, rugby league, rugby union, unfortunately, football. From that, like some of the great cultures that we're seeing and great leadership, like what stands out for you? I mean, you can talk about Warrington if you like.
Yeah, I will do eventually. I think like a lot of people think any sport in team or organisation that's the longevity of success is impressive. So obviously, Man United under Sir Alex, for example, when he kind of reinvented them a few times during his long reign, and they never dipped too far below being right at the top. New England Patriots in the American football and the NFL had sort of 20 years of being there or thereabouts, right at the top of the game. Things like that obviously impressed me. But I think what interests me most is when a team changes their culture. So they go from a team who never won towards them being the best. And you can include the Patriots in that, really, because the Patriots for the first 30, 40 years of their existence they weren't without any success at all, but they were one of them, almost like not a joke team's a bit harsh, but they weren't one of the most successful teams at all in the NFL, but then they became a league team. So, and I'm not a massive NBA fan, but I remember watching a little bit of basketball, late 80s, early 90s. But looking back on it and reading about it and watching documentaries on it, there's a team that really stands out for me is the Detroit Pistons, who are known as the Bad Boys. So at the time, it was the Lakers and the Celtics were the two big teams, and they would almost take turns winning it, and they kind of dominated between them. And the Pistons were kind of knocking on the door for a little bit. Eventually, they go through and won a couple of titles before Michael Jordan and his Bulls took over, so they nipped in there. But they never won a title before this. They weren't like an historic team by any means. But I just think the way they went about it was the Lakers and the Celtics tended to have like the superstar players and then backups. And in basketball, generally they have 5 starters and then 5 that come on and rest, and then come off for a bit to give the starters a rest. With the Lakers and the Celtics, there was quite a drop off. As you understand it, when these guys came on, Detroit looked at it and said, "Well, we're going to try and get 10." Where when they swap over, the drop off is minimal. Well, that became part of their identity then, to create this kind of 10 rather than 5, and at least 5 there as well. Also, they obviously said, we can all defend. We might not be superstars with the ball, but we're going to make ourselves the best defensive team there is out there. Which included a few roughhouse tactics that got them the nickname the Bad Boys, from what I can gather, maybe the most unpopular team in NBA. It was still that they were creating an identity there. They weren't trying to copy the Lakers or the Celtics. They were saying, this is us. We're going to have to do something a bit different, and we're going to create that entity. For us, Bad Boys, that's absolutely fine. We're more than happy to be called Bad Boys. And we're going to create that sort of team ethos of all 10 players, similar standard, and we can all do our job. So I find that fascinating when they have to, without any history, without any, financial backing or anything like that, they have to change something to upset the apple cart a little bit. And if you keep doing what you've always doing, you're going to get what you've always got. So they have to change something. If they try and copy somebody who's just better than them, usually they stay better than you. Because if you're behind somebody in a race and from then on you copy them, you're still going to be behind them. Because every step they say, you say one, and others keep saying away. So things like that are interesting, which obviously brings me on to Warrington, in terms of they've gone a long, long time without winning anything, so something needs to change. 1955 to be specific. So if you watch Back to the Future, that's when Marty goes back to, just to give you an idea of how long ago it was. I think Churchill was Prime Minister. It's something needs to change, and obviously the way rugby league is, it's going to have to change in a big moment. It's going to have to be Old Trafford, pretty much packed out, and you've got to win that match. You've got to win the last game of the season. they have finished top of Super League a couple of times in the Super League era, but you don't become champions for that. You can't win Super League by winning 26-24 at Wakefield on a Friday night. No disrespect for Wakefield fans listening. You can't kind of back into it, or you can't think, oh, Wigan lost at the weekend, so that means we're champions now.
Yeah.
It's not like a football scenario. Sooner or later, they've got to do something to change that mindset or belief or whatever it is that says when it comes down to the big game, rather than finding a way to lose, we're going to find a way to win. That's what's happened throughout. They've had some exceptional teams, particularly that sort of 2011, 12, and 13 team, Greer and Hodgson. That team, they really should have won one in that 3-year period, if not two, if not all three.
Yeah.
And it was always my belief at the time that, and even before that had those exact players been at Wigan or Saints, for example, they would have won more. I can never prove that. No, I can never. That's not something tangible. But there's that belief of, again, from the outside looking in, there's an element of, oh, we're playing for Warrington, so the expectations were here. As long as we have a nice cup one every now and again, make the playoffs most years, the fans will kind of accept that and they'll kind of put up with it. It did change a little bit once sort of Simon Moran got involved and we had the money to spend and we were attracting better players. Then the expectation did change noticeably then to, hang on, we started winning Challenge Cups, and so we should be winning a Challenge Cup every year. And obviously, don't win it every year, but we're kind of looking to win it. Whereas in 2009, when we got to Wembley, we were unbelievable. We can't believe how we haven't been for so long. Whereas now we kind of expect to get there every 2 or 3 years. But yeah, it's so difficult when you're on the outside of it. But it would just be, you just don't quite feel there's that. Absolutely everybody pulling together in the same direction with a very clear plan as to how we're going to win that big game. You can't guarantee, no one can ever guarantee you're going to win but what is that? How are we going to win that? And if you look at all the grand finals they've lost, football I think it is now, and some of the semi-finals they've lost, I can't remember them being blown out. It's usually a close game. They've been competitive, usually a close game, and there's usually 2 or 3 or sometimes just 1 or 2 moments in the game that turn it. We can sit here as long as we like as Warren fans and complain about referees or bad bounces or this, that and the other. Sooner or later, if that keeps happening, you've got to think we're finding a way to lose here rather than finding a way to win. And there's sometimes an element of you just have to, rugby league's a classic case of 2 teams going at it and waiting for the other team to break. And then sooner or later, one team does break. Warrington need to find a way to be that team that doesn't break. So if you don't play the other team well, going back to the Pistons argument, do they need to do something different? Do they need to come up with a different playing style, which is kind of what they had in that 2011, 12, 13 period, and under Tommy Smith, they did play a little bit differently to some of the other teams, maybe. So if we keep trying to do the same thing as Wigan, as Hull KR are doing now, as Saints did in the last few years, Leeds to an extent Leeds are a bit different. But if we keep just trying to do what they're doing and we always lose at their game, and it comes down to it. So it's different ways of looking at it. But yeah, something needs to change, and just that element of belief of when it comes down to it.
It's almost like you said, the big games are about winning.
Yeah.
No matter like how you do it, you just got to win and get across the line. And we've seen so many finals. I remember one where Blake Green got punched on the floor by Benny Westwood, and I'm not sure how he didn't get
No.
Did you put in the sin bin for that or not?
No, I don't think they even picked up.
So even if you take that era of the game to now, probably be in a bit of trouble for doing that. Yeah, the way we're wrapping them in cotton wool now, by the way. And then I think in that game, Wigan were actually way behind on the scoreboard.
I think it's about 16-2, something like that at one point.
Correct.
Yeah.
And went on to win the game. So obviously there was some sort of collapse there.
Yes.
And you think to yourself, well, icing those big games, the big moments, I always feel with Warrington, if they get one, they'll probably get half a dozen. Just everything else around the club has always been in place. Good community club, good placing within the town. There's no major distractions for.
No.
You've obviously got big football cities for any Kiwi listeners either side. Warrington.
Yeah.
You've got the stadium, nice little Halliwell John stadium there with a good atmosphere, good fan base.
Yeah.
it's just that win, isn't it? Like getting that first grand final across the line. You've had Challenge Cups in the past. And it's almost like you've got to lose. We always think you've got to lose one to win one. And tried to Chris about Liverpool yesterday, and they'd lost a few finals. And eventually they got a Premier League title. And it took them a long time to do that. Got it across the line. I was Phil Warrington, and that's
it. And they've got to a stage now where it's like a different generation of players. So you almost feel like you have to start again a little bit. So, like you say, that big believer in sometimes having to lose one to win one. But that's the last time they lost a grand final was 2016. So there's not many of those players left at all now.
Right.
In the squad. So you're thinking, do we need to lose another one now? And how long? Obviously on absolutely as well. But one, can't remember which grand final it was now, but I think it was, it might have been the other one, where Wigan beat us, but it's lots lower score. I think it was like 10-6 or 12-6 or something. But we got, whichever one it was anyway. We were within a score of at least leveling it, if not going ahead later on. And we got the ball within 20 metres of the opponent's line. They knocked us on it, so we had a full set there. And I remember all the fans getting dead excited. And everybody's like cheering. And I literally remember making the motion, not that they're ever going to see me, but like, calm down, calm down. Not to the fans, but to the players. It's like you could see them sort of getting giddy a little bit, and you're thinking that was their moment then to be like, right, we need to be ice cold here. This is our chance to build a set, score a try, or get a repeat set, whatever it is. But be knocked on in like the second or third tackle or something, and the moment had gone. So the biggest thing like that stick in my memory is that little tiny. It's not even 1%. It's like 0.1% of when that moment comes. Can you be ice cold enough? Can you be that sort of assassin? Whatever you want to call it. It was just like, right, okay, we're doing this now. And also that element of the team knowing when you see the best rugby league teams, whether it's Australia or Brisbane Broncos in the early 90s or whatever, there's a fluidity to the movement, isn't there? Everybody knows where they're going. Everybody knows what one they're making at the start and the other. When you see Warriors teams, especially when it comes to the bigger games, it doesn't look like there's that cohesion there. Instead of, right, okay, in this moment, we need to score to win a grand final. We all know what we're doing. And it's never quite been there. So
with your sports psychology hat, and having chatted to a few Super League players that have won grand finals, have been part of regimes, dynasties, if you like, very basic processes where they'll either kick early or just you mentioned it before, put another team in the corner and wait for them to crack. And that has been the philosophy. We've seen Penrith Panthers win 4 NRLs on the bounce recently. Andrew Johns talks about it in Origins, where they just kick early, part of that process, but being ice cold. Do you put it down to the culture of the organisation or the leadership? Because, again, to go back, we were talking about the All Blacks before, they talk about redheads and blueheads. And going back, being very blue-headed means obviously calm and focused. And you talked about the assassin before. And being a killer. And that's kind of really what you need to ice those big moments in big games. What do you put that down to?
I mean, it's always fascinating when you talk about team sport. When you're talking about tennis or golf or something like that, you can really analyse the individual and say they struggle in that situation or they thrive in the situation or whatever. But when you've got 13 players, 17 if you include the bench, you've now got to look at 17 different minds, 17 different individual people of what situation are they going to thrive in that situation, are they going to struggle in that situation. You've also got potentially 17 people who can break the plan, who can, if you've got 13 on any one time, 12 of you are going, like, we're going 2 players that way and then we're going to go try and attack that corner. The 13th guy could pick it up and dummy off and one in the opposite direction. So you've got so many variables there. You wonder as well, obviously, like, you don't know what's going on in clubs, but in terms when it comes to recruitment of players, are you recruiting, how are you treating your players that you're going after? So are you just going after kind of marquee signings, for want of a better word, with like a headline signing? Are you signing because they're good to the ball? Are you signing because they're good defensively? Or are you signing because they've been there, done it, got the T-shirt, they've been in the culture of making perform in the big moments? So, I mean, that's when, like, we've already signed Powell. That's potentially a good signing because he's been there, been in a winning culture, He knows what it's like, and I think that probably has helped. But then obviously you can't do one or two people. It's got to sooner or later just got to filter out into everybody. And I just think you only need one player to crack for that crack to happen. So there's so many things that, and it's not that it's such a difficult situation. On the one hand, you definitely don't want to create that fear of being the one that makes a mistake or anything like that. When I say crack, it doesn't mean necessarily that you a knock on or a missed tackle or whatever. It's just that element of I've gone. I don't think I'm going to win anymore. That crack there. So, and I think I don't know about you, but as you get older, you realise how young sports people are, and you think, oh, these are. They might be in the 20s or even in the 30s, but in a way they're still kids because all I've ever known is playing rugby league. They've been at the academy, been looked after there, they've signed their first professional contract, and then that's all they've ever known. Obviously, some of them are incredibly mentally tough, more mentally tough than I am, more resilient. There might be some that are just not quite there in terms of when the heat really comes on, I might not really want that ball, or I hope that person doesn't run at me, potentially. So what you want is that feeling of every single person wanting the big moment to come to their door and be like, I want to be the one that hits the winning pass, finishes the winning try, or makes that big collision to cause a knock on or win the game. And you don't want anybody thinking to hope they actually happen somewhere else and we end up winning.
I mentioned the book, Legacy, about the All Blacks, what they can teach us with some of the philosophies. We were talking about that before, and it talks about good people making good All Blacks, and we're talking about coming into a system like Melbourne Storm or any other dynasty or Real Madrid, and being part of not just developing them as a talent on the pitch or whatever sport it might be, but developing the whole human being. And when you talk about, or we've talked about in the past, it doesn't have to be sport and organisations. No. Are you a good cultural fit? Or are you in there because of talent? Or are you in there because of both? And how are we hiring these people? Because I had a friend come to me who worked in government in New Zealand, and they were hiring in the department. And she asked for my advice in terms of the interview process. And I said, obviously, we want to try and explore the beliefs and values of the people that you're bringing in. And how do the values align to the values of the organisation? So just asking them questions to tease that out. Simply, how are you? Let's say one of our values is professionalism. Tell us the last time you were a professional, right? So it's teasing that information out to see, because you only really get a 60 to 90 minute window in an interview. But for you and I going for a job, to actually tease out the information of are they a good fit or not? And the repercussions of that further down the line if you get a wrong hire or a wrong player in an organisation. But also the other angle to that is we're not just developing people physically, it's mentally, emotionally, socially. It's all these different strands for the player and or the employee. There's so many variables. So you really need to do your homework. And I think that's why culture is so important, is we can start to tease out some of those things about, is this player good for our team? Will they wilt under pressure? How can we develop them? Or is this employee going to cause us issues further down the line because they don't see value in what we're doing here? And it does become really critical. And I think this underpins a lot of stuff. Some of the questions we ask, Rob, towards the end of this podcast, one of them, this has become actually a ritual or a tradition, quite ironically. What's the one left field idea that you may have seen within culture or teams or psychology or youth or suicide prevention that's a bit left field but means quite a lot to you and you think it's a great idea?
I think what the thing I try and get across to people all the time, whether it's rugby coaching or any work environment, is mistakes are fine. I'd rather have a team of people trying to be positive, trying to do the right thing and making mistakes. Who's to say what a mistake is and what a mistake isn't sometimes? So rather than a team that is scared of making a mistake. So I guess the rugby analogy would be a team just doing 5 drives and a kick is maybe scared of making the mistake. I'd rather a team that threw that pass 10 times and yes, it hit the ground 2 or 3 times and would have created a try 3 or 4 times as well. So that sort of dynamic because of the longer term impact of that, in terms of, yes, the team that does the 5 drive and the kick might beat that team that makes a few mistakes on the day in a one-off game, but as a philosophy of enjoyment, identity, what type of team you are, you kind of back yourself to be like, do you know what, this is how we play. It won't be perfect all the time, but this is how we do. And then players have that feeling of, if I make a mistake, the coaches are going to try and remember the calls for it, because I was trying to do. You might ask me, what did you see there? Why did you think that pass was on? And you can say, oh, I saw this, and that's why I did it. Okay, right, no. So creating that culture. I don't know. The cricket at the moment is fascinating. The England cricket team, they call it, people on the outside call it pass ball, but I believe that in the team they don't like it being called pass ball. That element of a clarity of thought in terms of, you just do whatever you think is best to win this game for us. We will back you. If you whack it up in the air and it ends up being caught and everybody else says that's a terrible shot, that's okay. If you think that's the best thing to do in that moment, we will back you. So yeah, I think that sort of philosophy of just, almost, it sounds silly to say embracing the mistake. In life, I think the thing you fear the most is that you kind of attract it towards you. So if you spend your whole life being fearful of making a mistake, you're kind of more likely to make it anyway. If you walk downstairs terrified of falling, you're much more likely to stumble than if you just walk downstairs without thinking about it. So yeah, I think that, and it's difficult in sport at times, as we've just been talking in a grand final, to come to that philosophy of, let's just throw the ball around, get to manner if we get beat. That's really difficult, hard to take on that one thing. But if you can look at the overall philosophy of it and say, it's a bit like the teams that I think Brisbane used to do, where they said, look, we're never going to take a penalty goal. We're going to back ourselves to wear the team down, to dominate the team. And we're going to say, we're better than you. We think we can score more often than that by attacking. Oh, I'm sure there were some games that you look back and you think, oh, they lost that by 2. If they kicked those 2 penalty goals, they would have won. But doing maybe other games where you don't even know, is because they scored 3 tries from times when they turned down 3 penalty goals and they won that way. So just that feeling, having that philosophy of, yeah, we might make a few mistakes, but this is us, this is how we play. We'll back ourselves in the long term to be better.
And again, to use that, an organisation-wide philosophy that you're backing people, giving them support, and if they make a mistake, that's human.
Yeah.
But empowering them to actually go out and play what you see and deal with the situation.
Yeah.
Because you can't control everything.
And ultimately as well, you become much more coachable then. Whether I'm managing a team of youth workers or coaching a rugby league team, if they don't make any decision, I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know how good they are. Like, if they're constantly coming to me saying, should I do this, should I do that, should I do that, I'm not finding it out about them. If they go and make a decision to run a certain project or speak to a young person that way, now I've got something to work with. Now I can say, okay, why did you speak to them like that? Why did you challenge that? Have you thought about doing this? And then they can get better. If they're constantly not doing anything, yes, they might make less mistakes technically, but they're not going to progress. They're not going to get any better. So yeah, I think that always rather, if we're managing a team, I'd always rather they just did something and it was maybe wrong, then they just did nothing. That's the obviously that comes from the top as well. If your manager is not like that, you quite often see people, and you can tell in your previous job you got micromanaged a lot. You know what I mean? And they're scared to do anything. They said, "Is it okay if I tell you out there?" Yeah, it's really noticeable that they have to check with you for everything before they do it, and it can be quite difficult to kind of break that chain sometimes, saying, "No, it's okay, just do stuff."
I always find it quite interesting with managers that they want you to do things, but they want them done their way.
Yeah.
That's kind of like an oxymoron. I can only do it my way.
Yeah.
And you give me the power and the support and the resource to go and do it.
Yeah.
Again, it comes back to that comment you made about being micromanaged. I've seen people come who work for government.
Yes.
And are very process driven, down to minute detail. And I've been a manager that's been a bit fluid. And with the Steve Jobs philosophy of, we employ smart people so they can tell us what to do, not what we're telling them what to do. And that's coming down to you making the right hires.
Yes.
And yes, you need some guide rails and a bit of support initially. But if that person's the right hire, then they should be able to go off and execute that job. And giving them some ownership and giving them some empowerment to go and do what you need to do. Because you're the right fit.
Yeah.
And you're the right person to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's an analogy you can use in business or sport.
Definitely. Yeah.
You know, making the right hire. And if they can't do that, is that on them or is that on you?
Well, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's so many times when you see, you can see, if you go to a restaurant or a cinema or whatever, and you see a staff member struggling with something, you think, well, that's not something that you can just intuit. It needs to be trained to know that that's what to do in that situation, or it needs to be told or something. And also in that situation where you get so many times where you think, make a decision, mate, but they've been so restrained by the managers or whatever that they can't, so they have to go find a manager to tell them to open the till or whatever. And again, that's still not their fault because they've not been empowered to make that decision.
I remember reading a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. It was, it was just all little anecdotes.
Yeah.
And one of them was just about just basically sitting and observing people. And on my flight over here, I went to, I was flying from Melbourne to Singapore, and I was with Qantas, and I was sat in the lounge, and you wait to get on the plane, you've got your boarding pass, and you've done all the bits and pieces that you do that's required of you in air travel these days. And we were sat in the seats right next to the gate, and a Qantas representative comes over and says, "Can you move off these seats, please? We need them for the staff."
Okay.
And I'm thinking, okay, we'll move. So we move, and there's a bunch of elderly people who like to sit down and give them my seat, and we're waiting. The Qantas employee is sort of stood and is clearly on the microphone, like to the people that are on the walkie-talkie to the people on the plane, and it's just being a little bit fussy and a little bit like gossipy, and would put the microphone down and then start slagging her staff off to one of her other colleagues, and you sit there and observe. And I just sat there for 10 minutes observing, thinking, I can now see probably what's going wrong here in a little bit, with that employee and the team and the organisation. And do I want my customers to be seeing those sorts of behaviours? And what is going wrong here? And subsequently, nobody sat on those seats, by the way. We were just made to move because that lady was the boss and in control. But then when you sat and observed, you actually saw some behaviours that you really want from a team member.
They were clearly not happy.
And then just that come down to the team to actually address that themselves and say, come on, David or Karen, pull your head in there.
Yes.
Or is that then a leadership conversation?
You get that in sport, don't you? Sometimes have like player-only meetings and stuff, don't they? Which always fascinate me. Well, Warrington used to do that every now and again. Often at Wakefield for some reason, but you'd see him on the pitch after getting beat or narrowly winning but playing badly. And before they went off to the tunnel, they would huddle together.
I remember this.
On one hand, you'd think, okay, good, they care. They're trying to sort it out, they're trying to fix it. But then you start thinking, what do they think they can say there that they can't say in the dressing room? So that's a bit of a concern as well. So if I was coaching that, I'd be like, what don't they want me to hear? Why am I involved in this? But what do they feel like they can't say in front of me? I'm not saying that there's never a time for players only meetings. Sometimes it can be the sign of a bad culture rather than a good one as well, in terms of that element of, we can only say this here because so-and-so, we don't want so-and-so here, and why do you want your leaders here? That could be a leadership problem, or it could be a team problem. So that's related, isn't it?
It'd be good to be fly on the wall with
to
know what's going on.
What are you actually saying there that you feel like you cannot say? Who is it you don't want to hear that?
Yeah. A couple of final questions for you, Rob, before we wrap up. Culture 360 is obviously from every angle. And the podcast and the blog called Culture 360, which is part of the Culture Room.
Yes.
And Culture 360 is from every angle, different perspectives and lenses, and we look at different industries, and it's not just sport, it's business and anything. So anybody listening that thinks it'd be a great idea for a podcast, then please get in touch through all my contact details at cultureroom.co.nz. But what's the one angle that we're missing, Rob? What's the one idea that you've had rattling around your head, or a light bulb moment in anything that you've been working on in your work or personal life? What's the one angle or the one thing that we're missing that you would either bring into youth? You want to change culture or psychology, or your passion for Warrington Wolves or writing? What's the one thing that we're missing?
I think I looked at that and I thought, you might already be doing this, but I couldn't see any obvious evidence of it. That element of working with individuals. So most people, especially now more so than ever, people move jobs. People go around different places. Obviously, players go from different teams and this, that, and the other. in terms of, because you can do your team building stuff, which is here's the team here, and we're going to work with all of them together to make this team better. But you can also do stuff with, here's an individual person here, how can I help them be a better team? So that element of, doesn't matter where that person then goes, they can help improve it. Whereas I think sometimes when you just work with that team, you're fitting within their parameters, if you like. So you're within that team, the stuff you're doing with them will help that team get better. But if you take one of them out and they go to a different job, then trying to recreate that might not work there. So maybe that element of it'll be broader possibly in terms of the stuff you're covering with individuals. Yeah, this is more sort of almost big picture stuff, but it's just scope there for being like one day it being like a training course, or it being something that people can pass to say, I've done a course on being a good team player, and then they can take that to interviews and so on and say, I can help change your culture by doing this, that, and the other. So yeah, that's what I thought. That element of, can you do team stuff with an individual? So when wherever they go, they know how for them to be the best team player they can be for that team, but also can they help their team get better?
I think something we're starting to develop with the culture room is like there's a canvas type scenario where we focus on the individual.
Yeah.
So you develop yourself.
Yeah.
So developing the self. Yeah. So what are your beliefs and your values and the whole human being? And then can you tell them about us? Some people don't do that work about who they are and their identity. You've mentioned identity.
Yeah.
And then you look at your peers and they're doing the same. So person left and person right. Yeah. And what are they about? So you understand them in the team. And then there's the collective, the team, the wider team. So what do we stand for? Yeah. What's our purpose, vision? What do we want to be seen as? And then in some roles, it then bleeds into your customers or your members, or if it's a sport, your participants and the wider structure. So they're the kind of pillars that we're going to be focusing on, and we want to develop a canvas that addresses all those areas. Right. So it's about the individual, it's about your peers and colleagues, it's about the team, and then it's about your customers. Yeah. So that's where we're coming from. Yeah. I know what you're trying to, is how does somebody take their individual self and make a team better, and how we actually, I guess, make that work operationally.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people want to do that, but they try and recreate a team that they've been in somewhere else. It doesn't quite work because it's a different job or it's different people and so on. So yeah, if people could be educated, and it's a massive subject, but on that element of, okay, in every situation, how can making this team better will be different. You do something different to this team to make that team better. So yeah, that'd be really interesting. I think the breakthrough moment for me was probably when I ran about early on in youth work, when I just started asking the question, why? So why is that young person that room? Why are they throwing that thing? Why are they joining in? Why do they only talk to the male members of staff and not the female members of staff, or the other way around, or whatever it is? There's always a reason for the way everybody behaves. They might not know the reason. Sometimes it's kind of a subconscious reason. But you map out over everything, whether it's why is this team not working? Why do those two not get along? There's always a reason. Keep coming back. If you ask why often enough, you get to the real answer. And then sometimes then you might not be able to change it for whatever reason, but at least then you know why it's working and why it's not working. So yeah, that would be my sort of like little moment thing for me that has carried on to everything I've done since then is why are they upset now? Why are they okay doing that but not that?
You never know what's going on for people, right?
Exactly.
And you're trying to understand whether it's a conscious or a subconscious decision.
Yeah.
And I think we spoke about that before, like the older and wiser we've got, we've recognized what's going on for ourselves, and we've got the ability to step out of that, lean in, understand what's going on for ourselves for the most part, and sometimes actually deal with it. Like, do you have the tools in the box to deal with?
Yeah.
To coin a young person's phrase, people being triggered. So why am I triggered by that? Yeah. It doesn't sit with my values or beliefs. Or I don't really like the way that person's behaving because of X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And then you can address it in the appropriate way rather than react it. Yeah. And that's kind of what's gone on for me around culture. On the blog, one of the first entries that I put on the website was Steve Peters' The Chimp Paradox, and understanding the processes around your brain, which I think's it's funny, culture seems to keep coming back to this question about psychology and how we behave and how we think within teams and on our own. And it keeps coming back to that. Like, if we could all have a bit more self-awareness and understand why we're doing what we're doing and where it fits into the big picture, I think we'd probably be in a better position. Final question, Rob. Not to harp on about rugby league too much, but it's a common interest we both had and something we bonded over many years. Who's your pick for Super League champions this year and why?
I don't think it's an easy answer. I actually, if I had to put money on somebody, I'd actually go Hooker. Because I think, talk about stone cold killers. I think they are. That's the way I describe them as a team. They're quite basic. They're not doing anything that anybody else isn't doing, but they're just doing it a little bit better than most teams. They are really, really, and it looks like they absolutely all got the buy-in to that. They're all complete arse out sets, kick to the corner, aggressive defence, and then a little bit of magic from one or two players, as and when we need it. And I think slightly traumatised here, but the fact that they got the Wembley win one way or another.
Beating Warrington, you mean?
That's correct.
Yes. Yeah. Just for the listeners' purpose.
Hence of a moment of controversy at the end. But I think that, and the way they've carried on since, I know they lost the other week, but there's usually a drop-off after Wembley. Their intensity level is impressive. They are 9 out of 10 at least every week. So I just think and now having won at Wembley, the first major trophy for so long, it might just be a last little 1%. They need to think, actually, we can't, not just a very, very good team, we can actually beat the team. Having said that, for a different reason, Leeds would be interesting as well, because they're that bit different. I think that the style of play is a bit different.
Leeds Rhinos.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, I'm loyal to say Wigan, so. But obviously, they're very much in the conversation until somebody knocks them out of the playoffs. They're very, very much in the conversation. But I just got a feeling it depends. Obviously, injuries and stuff can make a massive difference. But I think hopefully I've just got that sort of, to coin a phrase, it could be there. Yeah.
And on that note, from a Warrington bag, Rob, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time and your knowledge sharing with us on Culture 360 podcast. It's been amazing to get the insights from you, and it will be your year, 1 year.
1 year.
Just keep the faith.
One day, somehow, someday. Brilliant. Thank
you. Cheers. If you enjoyed the Culture 360 podcast, and like me, you geek out on leadership and organisational culture, then please smash a like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Also, if you have any feedback or ideas, or you'd like to get in touch, then please connect with the Culture Room at thecultureroom.co.nz or on our various social media platforms. Thanks for listening.